We've all seen the lovely kids movie Rio, yes? How many wines have you had, Petter?
I just filled it up to the top, so I'm here now,
Nice.
and I'm gonna pour a
Smart.
full another one. It's
Nice.
Friday.
Have you seen the movie Rio, Petter?
I'll just say yes. I think I have. I don't. Yeah.
Patrick, you've seen it, right? You have 2 daughters.
We just started it as like a because you know how it is. You watch a movie and then that's the only movie for 2 months. So we just watched it for the first time
Of
like a
course,
couple
yeah.
nights ago. Yeah.
Okay, it's this movie. It's a great kids movie, by the way. Second one loses the plot a little, but Rio one, tremendous. It's
Yeah.
all about this beautiful blue macaw that is the last of his kind. He's living in a bird cage in, I think, like Michigan with his female owner, and he's the last of his kind. And that movie is based on the Spix Macaw. Now, the Spix Macaw is, I think we've talked about this. It's a real animal from northern Brazil that lives in a high desert region that was driven to extinction. And I can go deep onto why it was driven to extinction in the wild, blah, 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 blah.
Well, yeah. I mean, just give us the the one line. How did it get humans?
I mean, yes, but it's kind of a confluence of things. So first of all,
Okay.
they're relatively low density. Secondly, they're beautiful, so they were collected for the pet trade.
Mm.
Then in this arid region, they brought in goats to farm in the area, and the goats ate all of the sapling trees that the Spix macaws nest in. At the
Mm.
same time, it's all really interesting, but at the same time, invasive bees came into the area. So the few large trees that did remain as nesting grounds for the Spix macaw, they nest in hollows of trees the same as these invasive bees. So these invasive bees came in and created hives in Spix macaw nesting areas. So before you knew it, there was only a few Spix macaws. There was nowhere for them to nest, and the remaining ones that were around got caught for the pet trade.
Mm.
So in boy, don't quote me on this, but I want to say like early 90s, late 90s, there was down to 16 Spix macaws left total. 0 in the
Damn.
wild,
Yeah.
16 across captive
It was
collections.
early
That's
90s.
Early
that's
90s. Great.
crazy.
Is
I'm
it
seeing
16?
I'm seeing
That's
15 is the
15.
number,
There you
so
go. There.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm this is
Still
all
like
off of
a-
memory.
You're off by one, sir.
An insanely low number.
This is all 100%
15
off
in
of memory.
captivity, 0 in the wild.
Right.
Crazy.
And then the story gets really crazy. I've wanted to write about this in the book that I'm currently working on, but the guy will not do an interview. My understanding, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for telling this, is there's a crazy guy who runs a parrot organization, and his name rhymes with Barton Schmuth. And Barton Schmuth is allegedly a German gangbanger who went to prison, this, that, and the other thing, but fell in love with these parrots. And what I respect, this is the stories I've heard. What I respect so much about this guy, who I won't say his real name, is that he came out of prison, quote unquote, reformed, but then continued to break the law, but it was laws of conservation. So my understanding is he collected a whole shit ton of money, flew around with nefarious money in private jets, collecting the remaining Spix macaws and took them all to Germany, and then started a breeding program against like the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, against like the Brazilian government, against all these people. He's like, fuck you guys. If we don't act, these macaws are going extinct. So this crazy German gangbanger guy, again, just my understanding, I don't know him, flew around the world collecting these macaws after getting out of jail, I believe, breaking all kinds of international smuggling laws, IUCN laws, like CITES laws, everything, brought as many of these parrots as he could together and started a Spix Macaw breeding program. This is all hearsay. This is what I've heard through the grapevine. You know,
Yeah, but very interesting nonetheless.
if whatever I made the rhyme of his name sounds like, here's this. I'm sorry. This is just what I've heard, because I do respect this person a lot for doing this and saying, fuck you. Because as we all know, one of my biggest gripes of conservation is that it's people sitting around talking about doing things, not taking action. And this guy just said, fuck it, and just did it. Anyway, broke a lot of laws, made a lot of people really unhappy, and started this breeding program for these parrots. Now, of course, because he's done that, he's valuable to the parrots, and now he's sort of seen as a hero. But he created this parrot breeding program. There's now several hundred or several thousand in captivity at various zoos and facilities around the world.
That's great.
Ventara, India, the place that I went to and filmed at, that I've talked about a couple times, they have one of these captive breeding programs. So they got a bunch of these parrots that came from the 15 and started breeding them, and they bred 42 of them that they then flew again on a private jet, I believe, all the way from India to northern Brazil, where the ACTP, the parrot organization, is doing reintroduction programs, which my team actually, Mitch and JQ, went and filmed the first ever reintroduction into the wild. And that was, I believe, 6 birds 2 years ago. And then Ventara and ACTP and the Brazilian government in collaboration just released 2 or 3 days ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, whatever it was, 41 Spix Macaws back into the wild. So like,
That's
and
fantastic.
but what's even more fantastic is they've gone through all the trouble of like assuring that these animals that were extinct in the wild are now going to thrive. Like they've removed the goats, they've planted trees, they've tried to get rid of the invasive bees. Like it's like full picture conservation. And all of this has come about by this crazy guy who's like, fuck you, conservation organizations. I'm just going to do this because if I don't, the animal's going to disappear. And I think it's awesome.
Probably a rare instance of somebody like that doing that and then it succeeding at such a grand scale. Like you wouldn't recommend like there's that guy, and then there's the guy that goes and releases the goldfish into the pond.
Of course. But the difference is it doesn't need to be education like you need to go to university. You just have to make educated decisions. Like the PETA folks that go and buy fucking grocery store Maine lobster and throw them into the San Diego Bay are idiots and assholes, and they're hurting the environment.
Right.
This guy, Schmartin Schmuth, or whatever the hell I made up his name. Yeah. He actually like studied this and was like, holy shit, if I don't do something, these birds are going to go away while conservation organizations sit around and argue and protect, their few birds.
Right.
And so it's just a different thing. It's not like I'm an activist, I'm an eco-terrorist, I'm going to go do this thing. It's like, hey, I made like a good choice here for the good of a species. And he did.
It's a plan. I mean, it's kind of parallel to something you would do that's sanctioned, that you got all the permits and the approval for, whatever you had to do, or most of the permits and approval, and then went out and followed through with a plan and coordinated with other organizations that were working towards the same thing. Whereas kind of the eco-terrorist side of it, like you can't just reintroduce, these lobsters into the ocean where their habitat's already decimated, or there's some now other non-invasive species that's taken over there. And now you're just starting a war of lobsters in the ocean.
This is interesting. I was just reading about the macaw and how they sort of made the comeback. So all of the 200 plus that are alive between captivity and the ones that were released descend from 7 birds.
Yeah. So
all of the currently living birds, the gene pool started with 7 birds in Switzerland.
Does that explain why though? Because there's an interesting reason to that.
Was it the Sheikh, the guy, the Qatari guy?
So the Qatari guy, my understanding, and again, this is all hearsay, so people can fact check this or look it up online. But my understanding is the Qatari guy was the one who financed Schmartin Schmuth, or whatever I said his name was.
That would track because that would track because
but
he basically rounded up as many of the birds as he could and started a breeding program in Qatar.
Then the birds that he rounded up in Qatar are, I forget what it was, but it's basically, I think it was 2 males and 5 females, and one of the males was infertile. So it was all down to one horny bugger to do the whole job. And literally this guy, he just had the dream job. He was just like, pipe chicks as much as you can. Yeah. And that's what he did. He laid more pipe than a plumber and saved a species.
Well, they got up to 64. There's 64 birds in that facility now.
Pretty awesome. So I love that story. I love the whole plight of the Spix Macaw. Kyle, see if you can. It's on, I think it's called Vagabond. It's Mitch and JQ's YouTube channel, and it has the reintroduction of the Spix Macaw. This is the only footage that exists of it. None of this makes any sense to me. Not just the whole Spix Macaw story, but this. Mitch and JQ got high. I got contacted, and then I was like, I can't help much with this. Use my camera guys, because they got hired to film the reintroduction of the Spix Macaw, the first one ever. It was like 6 birds or something 2 years ago. And they filmed it all and edited it all beautifully for our nefarious guy that I'm mentioning. And then he was like, yeah, cool, I don't really want it. So they just put it on their YouTube channel. So
what's their channel called?
What's their channel called, Kyle? You can pop on for a second.
Well, we got the video playing here too, right? Is this it?
It is Vagabond. Okay, this is them though. These are the birds. Look how beautiful they are that actually went back into the wild. And they filmed and edited this whole thing. Mitch and JQ. Just go scrub forward to the 3.5 hours it took for the birds to actually leave the nest. So the way they did it was really interesting too, because I know we've talked about this many, many times, because you can't just dump birds in the wild, like they won't survive. It, like you have to do it carefully.
Yeah.
They had this whole program, which was like the soft release. So you can see the radio trackers on the birds, which they're wearing there. And man, I'm trying to remember what species it was, but they used another species, kind of like a Judas goat, like to show them what to do. And I don't remember what the other species was, but they basically made the Spix Macaws friends with another species. And then
wait, was that Peter's wife?
Dude, I thought the same thing.
Legit, there's just cut to a shot of Peter's wife.
She is hot.
Can you bring that back up?
Oh, wow. That looks
incredible.
Lot like Leah.
It's pretty alarming.
Yeah.
Well, alarming for you. I mean,
is this her previous life? Was she a Spix Macaw?
Was she a
Macaw?
Spixer?
I don't know, but I'm turned on right now. I will say.
Let me finish the Juice Goat thing because it's interesting. So for their soft release, maybe Kyle will find it or somebody will find it, but they used another species that was native and comfortable there, put them into captivity, made the Spix friends with those, and then let those ones out first. And then after a week or so, they opened the door for the Spix, and they're like, all right, go find your buddies. And it took the Spix, because they'd been raised in captivity, they left the doors open so the Spix could come and go, but it took the Spix like 3 hours to actually leave the cage and go like, all right, let's go check this out. And then they went looking for their buddies, and their buddies were like showing them around. You know what I mean? They're like Judas goating.
That's
so
amazing.
Cool.
I've never heard of that. Didn't know that was a thing. And it's like, I always learned something fascinating. Well, probably like once an episode now. It used to be like 3 or 4 times. And that's it for this episode. I mean, it's unbelievable that they went out, like just hanging out with their buddies. Like, oh yeah, check it out. You can fly over here. You get to check this out over here. Oh, look at this beautiful river. Like,
yep. Here's a good nesting ground. There they are. See the Judas parrots there?
Yeah, totally different birds.
But those are them. And they're like, hey, buddies, like, this is pretty sweet over here. And then, that all led to the first ever returning to the wild of the Spix Macaw. And now, 2 years later, the big pot of 41 has gone back. So anyway, it's a lot of time on Spix Macaw, but it's a really cool story.
So, and then right now we went from 16 back in, what was that?
2 years ago. Oh, 16 was in the early 90s.
And now we're back up to like estimated.
I think there's several hundred in captivity, maybe over 1,000. I don't know.
I think it's definitely not 1,000. I think it's like a couple hundred.
Any in the wild? Do we not know? Are they tracking them? Or are they?
No. Well, what are you talking? It's literally what we've just talked about.
Well, that's what I was saying. So estimated in the wild, like the ones in captivity. Yeah, there's a few hundred, but like in the wild, do you think there's hundreds, thousands now? Or do they track it?
Am I having a stroke?
No, I don't know what's. So Peter, I'm not making fun of you at all.
It's okay. You can. I mean, I don't catch every little thing. I was so engulfed in the Judas birds.
It's the entire that Judas bird story and the entire news story. This all started when I said, Kyle, what's your favorite what's in the news story? Everything we've talked about is that there were none in the wild. And for the first time, they just released several of these birds into the wild.
Okay, I think I got a little confused because you said a couple of years ago, Mitch and them released a few, and then the news story they released more.
Fair. I'm confused by that too.
Okay, sorry. Well, it seems like you got it. Seems like you got it.
I'm just saying, is there 10 birds? Is there 100?
52.
Okay, 52. Thank you. That's all I needed.
So
Why not just say, hey, there was 52?
The first group went out with Mitch and JQ in 2022, I believe, and then 41 were released last month.
Okay, gotcha.
So now
I missed that 41 last blurb because I was so intrigued with the Judas
That's
birds.
fine. You know what? You cleared it up for those that weren't listening.
Well, and those who are pretty stupid laymen like me who are listening to the podcast.
Oh, that's cool.
So.
Kyle just said in May of 2024, 3 chicks were born in the wild, and one of them flew for the first time.
Oh, that's awesome.
So,
Love
it's all working. It's
a really fucking just great story, man, honestly. Be still my heart.